They didn't say it out loud, but every glance in that room screamed the same thing. She doesn't belong here. From the second Maya Alivera walked into the lawyer's office, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just cold, it was calculated. The type of stillness that sharpens itself against skin like a blade. She wasn't wearing a designer dress or gold around her neck. Just a plain white blouse, natural curls, dark skin, 17 years old. That's all it took for the Almeida family to decide she was invisible. Who let the cleaning girl in here? Victor scoffed from the corner, raising his champagne flute like he was making a toast to humiliation. Laughter echoed around the room, polite enough to be stifled, cruel enough to still wound. Maya didn't flinch. She kept walking, head high, eyes focused on the one empty chair at the center of the room, right beside the lawyer's desk. It was the only seat that mattered. Cristina, Eduardo Almeida's sister, draped in designer fashion and dripping in diamonds, whispered to no one in particular, "It must be one of my brother's charity cases." She probably came to ask for a donation. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't need to. In her world, people like Maya didn't hear, because people like Maya didn't matter. But Maya heard every word. She just chose silence as her sword. The walls of the office were lined with legacy, photographs of Eduardo shaking hands with foreign presidents, awards, architectural plans, global expansion maps. To most people, this room symbolized wealth. But to Maya, it whispered something else. Power passed down through indifference. She knew this house, knew this family, knew the things they did when no one was watching, because she was always there, unseen, cleaning up their messes. "She's probably lost," muttered Ricardo, Eduardo's eldest son, his suit crisp and expensive, his voice full of entitlement. "Someone get her out before Mr. Garcia arrives. This is embarrassing." And then, the door creaked open. Enrique Garcia stepped in, briefcase in hand, face unreadable. The family lawyer for over 30 years. His presence silenced the murmurs until he turned directly to Maya. "Miss Maya," he said, motioning toward the empty chair. "Please." Gasps. A glass hit the floor, and time stopped. Victor's face paled. Cristina clutched her purse like Maya might steal it. Ricardo straightened in his seat, confused but trying not to show it. "Excuse me," he said, his voice icy. "Do you know this girl?" Garcia looked around the room. "You all should," he replied. "This is Maya Alivera, the daughter of Donna Celeste." Maya sat down, unapologetic. Still, unshaken. She had scrubbed their floors, picked up their crumbs, laughed at their jokes to keep her job. But she was done playing small. Today, Maya wasn't just stepping into a room full of legacy. She was about to dismantle it, brick by brick, truth by truth. And the people who once laughed at her? They were about to learn what happens when you treat a girl like she doesn't belong, only to find out she owns the building. The moment the lights dimmed and the screen flickered on, the Almeida family leaned in, not out of curiosity but entitlement. They expected one last theatrical flourish from Eduardo, one final sentimental farewell before the numbers were read, and the money was split accordingly. Instead, what they got was a reckoning. The screen lit up with the image of Eduardo Almeida, gaunt from illness, but with a sharpness in his eyes that could still command boardrooms. His voice, though weakened, was steady, deliberate. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I am no longer among you." Silence fell over the room, thick and anticipatory. Patricia, still glued to her phone, lifted it slightly to film a clip for her followers. Her caption, typed in haste just minutes earlier, "Intruder at the will reading," had already started to circulate. Dozens of likes, comments pouring in, laughing emojis, disbelief. People loved a scandal, especially when it made them feel superior. But Eduardo's next words twisted the mood like a blade. "Before I get into how I divided my estate," he said slowly, "I have a question." He paused. "Can any of you tell me the name of Donna Celeste's daughter?" It was a simple question, and yet it detonated like a bomb. Maya sat still, her expression unreadable. Around her, the room turned restless. Ricardo frowned deeply. Victor shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his cufflinks. Christina glanced toward the window as if something outside could distract her from the shame settling into her bones. Patricia kept her eyes on her phone, though now she wasn't typing. She was waiting too. "I thought so," Eduardo said with a sad smile. "She's been working in this house for 5 years, helping her mother on weekends since she was 12. And yet not one of you thought to learn her name." Maya's hands remained folded in her lap, her back straight. She didn't cry. She didn't move. But something in her silence spoke louder than any outburst could. It was the silence of someone who had waited years to be acknowledged, and now had the entire room watching her for the first time, even if they didn't know why. Eduardo continued, and with every word, another brick in the Almeida family's pristine image crumbled. "I watched how you treated her, how you treated everyone who worked for you, as if they were invisible, disposable. I saw enough to understand who you really are behind your polished smiles." Patricia's hand began trembling. Her phone buzzed with fresh comments. "Is that girl actually at the reading? Wait, isn't she the cleaning lady's daughter? LMAO, this is wild. Y'all might be getting canceled for this one." And then, the real twist came. Enrique Garcia opened a sealed envelope. "I have been instructed to read the terms of Eduardo Almeida's will, effective immediately," he announced, his voice calm but heavy with consequence. Victor rolled his eyes. "Let me guess, a few thousand for charity, a scholarship fund. Maybe a painting for the museum." Garcia didn't flinch. "I, Eduardo Almeida, hereby leave 51% of Almeida Incorporos, my life's work, to Maya Alivera." The room didn't react at first. It froze. Garcia continued, unfazed. "In addition to the controlling shares of the company, Miss Alivera will inherit my primary residence, all the properties listed in Appendix A, and the sum of 20 million Ray in diversified investments." Victor's glass slipped from his hand and shattered. Christina gasped audibly, grabbing the arms of her chair like the room was collapsing. Patricia's phone slid out of her grip and fell to the floor. Ricardo stood up violently, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "This is manipulation," he barked. "She tricked him, took advantage of a dying man." Garcia lifted a hand. "Please let me finish. There are conditions." The family hung on to that word like it was their last hope. "Maya will not assume full control of the company until her 21st birthday. Until then, Almeida Incorporos will be managed by a temporary board, led by myself and Dr. Luisa Mendez." Christina scoffed. "The doctor? What does she have to do with this?" As if summoned by fate, the door to the office opened. A poised, elegantly dressed black woman stepped inside. Dr. Luisa. Her presence quieted the room in an entirely different way. Not from fear, but from unfamiliar authority. She didn't need to raise her voice. She simply looked at Maya and smiled. "I introduced Maya to Eduardo," Luisa explained, "because I saw something in her that none of you did." Maya stayed silent, her hands still clasped tightly in her lap, but for the first time, she allowed herself to breathe. Luisa turned toward the family. 3 months ago, I found Maya crying in a stairwell. Her mother was sick. She had just been humiliated by Ricardo while asking for help. He told her to find a new job if she couldn't afford medicine. Ricardo said nothing, he didn't need to. His silence confirmed everything. That night I told Eduardo about Maya, and that conversation changed everything. Garcia stepped forward once more. "There's another video Eduardo left behind, but he instructed me to only show it if his will was contested." Ricardo scoffed. "Of course it's being contested." Garcia didn't respond. He simply slid the next USB into the player. Eduardo appeared again, this time thinner, weaker, but with that same piercing clarity. "If you're watching this," he said, "it means my family is resisting the truth. Let me be clear, I was of sound mind. I made this decision after months of private conversations, recorded meetings, and observations." He paused. taking a breath that seemed to cost him. Maya did not manipulate me. She refused my offer at first. She told me she didn't want to be anyone's charity case. That's how I knew she was the right one. On screen, Eduardo's expression hardened. To my family, look in the mirror. You are not my heirs because of what you built. You're my heirs by birthright, and that's not enough. Then the images began to play. Ricardo berating an employee in front of a full conference room. Cristina firing Donna Celeste for missing a day due to illness. Victor laughing while mocking a driver's accent. Patricia making offhand racist remarks at a party, all caught on hidden cameras and cell phones Eduardo had quietly collected. Each clip was a punch to the gut. By the time the screen faded to black, the Almeida family no longer looked powerful. They looked small. Luisa gently placed her hand on Maya's shoulder. Eduardo didn't just choose her to inherit his company. He chose her because she had what none of you ever showed: compassion, integrity, and vision. And just like that, the narrative had changed. The girl they laughed at had become the woman holding the future in her hands. The family who once sat in judgment were now the ones being judged. By their own patriarch, by the public watching the viral post spiral out of control, and by the legacy they thought they'd inherited. But what they failed to realize was that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you leave it to. And Eduardo Almeida left everything to the one person who had seen the worst of them, and chose not vengeance but something far more dangerous: a plan to change everything. Ricardo was the first to erupt. "This is absurd," he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "She's just a maid's daughter. She doesn't have the background, the training, the—" Garcia didn't even flinch. He simply raised a hand, not to silence Ricardo, but to signal that his outburst had already been anticipated. "Mr. Ricardo, please remember, this reading is being documented. I suggest we all conduct ourselves with the dignity your father hoped for." Victor jumped in, slamming his glass down on the table. "You call this dignity? Handing over our legacy to some girl off the street?" Maya turned slightly in her seat, not to defend herself, but to watch them unravel. Her silence had become a mirror, reflecting back every insecurity they tried to bury under arrogance. Her very presence was an indictment. Cristina, who had spent the last decade crafting a persona of elite grace and charitable outreach, could no longer mask the venom behind her voice. "So now what?" she snapped. "We're supposed to pretend this charity case deserves to inherit an empire built by generations of Almeidas?" Garcia glanced briefly at Maya, then back at the family. "No, you don't have to pretend. You just have to accept reality," Cristina scoffed. "Your great-uncle Eduardo started this company selling fruit in a street market," Maya said softly, finally breaking her silence. "He built everything from scratch. So let's be clear. The only thing you all inherited was comfort. You didn't build this system, you were born into it, and now you act like it's your birthright to own it forever." A silence fell, but it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't dismissive or smug. It was defensive. Fragile. The kind that only appears when the truth finally finds its target. Then Garcia pressed a button under the table and the door opened again. Dr. Luisa Mendes stepped inside with poise, dressed in an understated navy blue suit, her presence commanding without saying a word. She didn't need to introduce herself. Her reputation preceded her, not just as a respected oncologist, but as someone who had quietly defied systems her whole life. She was more than Eduardo's doctor, Garcia explained. She's the one who introduced him to Maya. Luisa looked around the room, her eyes resting briefly on each family member. 3 months ago, she began, I found Maya sitting on the stairs outside the oncology ward, crying. Her mother needed surgery. She had gone to your brother for help. She turned to Ricardo. And you humiliated her in front of your team. Laughed. Told her if she couldn't afford the medicine, maybe she should look for a different job. Ricardo looked away. That same day, Luisa continued, I took her to meet Eduardo. I told him, if you're looking for someone to carry your legacy, start by listening to her story. Garcia stepped forward again, holding a thick binder. Which brings us to the second part of Eduardo's will, Appendix A. He placed the binder in front of him and opened it. A map appeared on the screen behind him, aerial footage of sprawling land parcels, not luxury estates, not skyscrapers, not beachfront villas, slums, forgotten neighborhoods, dilapidated communities built on top of land that once belonged to the very people now trapped inside them. These are the properties Maya now owns, Garcia announced. They were purchased secretly over the past 70 years. Originally, seized by the Almeida patriarch to build the company's first mall. Christina squinted at the screen. What does that have to do with anything? Garcia didn't answer. Maya did. It means the land wasn't yours to begin with, she said, and now, it's no longer mine either. Victor narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? I've already signed the documents, Maya replied. Effective immediately, every family currently living on those lands will receive full ownership rights, free of charge. The room exploded. You can't do that, Ricardo shouted, knocking over his chair. Those assets are worth millions. Patricia gasped. Are you insane? That land's been in our family for— Stolen, Maya cut in. It was stolen, and it's being returned. That's not revenge. That's justice. Christina's face turned crimson. You'll ruin the company. Garcia cleared his throat, moving to the next page. Actually, that's not all. As part of her first executive act as majority shareholder, Maya has authorized the issuance of a reparation package. He turned the page. Every employee terminated unfairly in the past 10 years, particularly those dismissed for reasons related to race, age, or socioeconomic status, will be compensated in full, effective immediately. Patricia dropped her phone again. That's suicide. Garcia clicked the remote. A TV screen on the wall blinked to life, showing a live news report. Reporters outside the company's headquarters, emotional interviews with former workers, footage of people receiving calls telling them they'd been rehired, tears, applause, justice, not as theory, but as action. This is happening right now, Dr. Luisa added. We planned it to coincide with the will reading. Ricardo was pacing now, sweat beginning to form on his brow. You're destroying decades of work for what? A feel-good moment? Maya stood up slowly, her voice calm but firm. You think I want to destroy this company? No, I want to rebuild it. Not for profit, for people. The Almeida family had always believed their power came from the money, the shares, the name. But now they were beginning to see what real power looked like. A 17-year-old girl with no inherited privilege, no financial safety net, no college degree, just a spine forged in silence and a will sharpened by every insult they had ever thrown at her. Christina, trembling, finally whispered, You really think you can run this company better than us? Maya looked her in the eyes. No, I don't. Then she turned toward the door. But I'm not running it alone. Garcia pressed a button. The doors opened once more. 5 people entered, 3 women and 2 men, dressed not in tailored suits, but in simple workwear. They were older, wiser, and they carried something the Almeida family had never valued. Experience. Meet the new board of directors of Almeida Incorporos, Maya announced. A gray-haired man stepped forward. Hello, Mr. Ricardo, remember me? Carlos Mendez. I worked in the finance department for 25 years, fired for suggesting a profit-sharing plan. Victor's mouth dropped. Christina looked physically ill. Dr. Luisa smiled. It's already done. Signed, filed, legal. You still own your minority shares, Garcia added. You'll receive dividends. Be invited to annual meetings, but you no longer control this company. Ricardo staggered as if the air had left the room. My father would never have allowed this, he said weakly. Maya walked toward him. Your father did this. And for the first time in their lives, the Almeida family was faced with a truth they could no longer buy their way out of. They never truly owned the system. They had just been benefiting from one they never cared to question. Now that system belonged to someone who had been born outside of it, and had the courage to remake it from the inside out. The screen blinked again, and there he was, Eduardo Almeida, fragile, pale, and close to the end. But his voice, clear, certain, uncompromising. "If this video is playing," he said slowly, "it means my family is fighting my decision. That doesn't surprise me." He took a shaky breath, then locked eyes with the camera. With them, with his legacy. "I want to make something clear. I was of sound mind. Every change to my will, every share transfer, every decision was mine. And Maya did not manipulate me. In fact, she resisted. It took time to convince her. Why? Because she's not like you. She didn't want power just to wield it over others." Ricardo clenched his jaw. Christina refused to look at the screen. Patricia, humiliated and unusually quiet, slowly reached for her phone, only to realize the damage had already been done. Her earlier post mocking Maya had gone viral, but not in the way she hoped. Comment after comment now condemned her. Screenshots were circulating. Headlines were forming. Eduardo continued, and this time the screen split. Video footage began to roll beside his face. Ricardo shouting at a janitor, throwing papers in frustration and calling him replaceable. Christina berating a receptionist for using the wrong tone on the phone, then cutting her pay. Victor making fun of a driver's accent, mimicking him for laughs at a company dinner. And Patricia, drunk at a party, slurring her speech and making a racial joke, caught on. A friend's live stream, clip after clip, scene after scene. The air in the room went still. Not out of shock, because deep down they all knew who they were, but from the horror of being seen. Eduardo's voice returned, flat and cold. "What you never understood is that your behavior wasn't just unethical. It was systemic. You didn't fail me. You failed every person who worked beneath you. And for that, you're no longer my heirs." A soft murmur broke the silence. "Patricia, this is a smear campaign. It's not fair. We didn't know we were being filmed." Maya turned to her. "You didn't know," she repeated. "That's the point." She stepped forward now, not in anger but in clarity. "You never cared how you acted when you thought no one important was watching. Because to you, the staff wasn't important. My mother wasn't important. I wasn't important." Garcia stepped forward with another file. "These recordings have already been archived with legal and journalistic entities. Should you wish to contest the will, they will become public record, and part of any discovery process." Ricardo's face went pale. "You wouldn't dare." Maya tilted her head. "No," Eduardo did. "He knew you'd fight this, that's why he documented everything." She looked at each of them now, her voice still calm. "This isn't about revenge. If I wanted revenge, I could have destroyed everything today. Liquidated the company. Gone viral with the videos. Called press conferences and named names." She gestured toward the screen. "But Eduardo taught me something before he died. He told me, Maya, anyone can destroy a system. Very few have the vision to rebuild one." The door opened again. More people stepped in. Men and women of different ages, races, and backgrounds. Some wore simple suits. Others wore work uniforms. One was a former janitor. One had worked in logistics. Another had been part of the finance team before being dismissed for questioning shady wage practices. "These," Maya said, "are your replacements. Your father's final wish was not to just remove power from those who abused, but to place it in the hands of those who know what it means to be overlooked." A former employee, Carlos, stepped forward, eyes on Ricardo. "Hello, Mr. Ricardo. I believe the last time we spoke I was being escorted out for suggesting profit sharing." Ricardo had nothing to say. "These people," Maya said, "have more integrity and experience than anyone currently sitting in this room." Patricia folded her arms. "You can't just erase us." Dr. Luisa, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "No one is erasing you, but Eduardo gave you a choice." She opened a folder and handed each family member a document. "These are your options. You may retain your minority shares, receive dividends, and keep your homes. But in exchange, you will undergo a full-year social reintegration program, volunteer work, diversity and inclusion training, and working in the very communities your family once exploited. Christina looked appalled. You expect me to go to the slums? No, Maya replied. We expect you to learn. And if we refuse? Victor asked, eyes narrow. Maya looked at him squarely. Then the videos are released, publicly. The lawsuits proceed. The court of public opinion won't be kind, and your names will forever be tied to the legacy Eduardo spent his final months trying to correct. Garcia added, every contingency is legally sound. You can fight, but you will lose more than just control. It was the first time Maya had spoken with true finality. This is not about revenge, this is about understanding, about accountability, about justice with purpose, not punishment for pride. Ricardo sat down, slumping in his chair. This will never work. You're just a girl. This empire will crumble in your hands. Maya smiled gently. You still don't get it, do you? It was never yours to begin with, and it's not mine now. It belongs to the people who built it, the people who suffered for it, the people who were never invited into this room until today. She turned toward the window, sunlight bleeding through the blinds like a new beginning. Behind her, silence settled like dust. The Almeida family wasn't facing a girl anymore. They were facing the future they refused to believe could exist, and that future had no room for their arrogance but plenty of space for accountability. This wasn't revenge, this was revolution, disguised as restoration. 6 months later, the marble floors of Almeida Incorporos didn't echo with the clack of designer heels anymore. They echoed with laughter, with life. The once sterile lobby, once curated to intimidate and impress, now housed a community center on its ground floor. Youth from the outskirts of the city came in daily, some in sneakers, some in uniforms, all carrying something they were never allowed before: possibility. The former empire that stood as a monument to elite wealth had become something else entirely. And at the center of it all stood Maya Alivera, not in a leather executive chair, not barking orders through a boardroom microphone, but walking slowly through the corridors, greeting every employee by name. Morning, Mr. Ruiz. How's your daughter? Hey, Jamila. Your project from last week? Phenomenal. I shared it with the investors. She wasn't just being polite. She meant it. She knew their names, their stories. Because unlike the family who used to sit atop this glass tower, Maya knew that leadership didn't come from a surname. It came from service. Last quarter's profits were up 12%. Carlos Mendez, now chief financial officer, couldn't hide his grin as he handed her the report. Turns out, profit sharing doesn't destroy productivity, he joked. It multiplies it. The artwork on the walls had changed too. Gone were the overpriced European paintings Eduardo once kept to impress foreign investors. In their place hung murals by local artists, each piece telling a story from communities long ignored. For the first time in the company's history, the building felt human. Dr. Luisa, overseeing the new social responsibility division, updated Maya with a quiet smile. The housing project has finalized titles for over 300 families. Next month, the first worker cooperatives launch. Maya nodded, her eyes drifting toward the window. Let's make sure the families aren't just owners, but decision makers. We're not just redistributing assets, we're rewriting ownership itself. And somehow, despite being only 17, still in her final year of high school, Maya navigated it all with grace. She studied at night, visited her mother, now recovering with proper care, still made time to read, still asked questions, still listened more than she spoke, because Maya never wanted to be a boss. She wanted to be a bridge, and yet not everyone was ready to walk across it. Ricardo, once the proud heir to the Almeida fortune, now sat in a downtown cafe, wearing plain clothes. His luxury car, gone. His arrogance replaced by silence. A notification buzzed on his phone. Administrative assistant position, social reintegration program. He stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was a final humiliation or a second chance. Across the street, Patricia, once obsessed with clout, carried flyers for an anti-racism workshop. "It's not as bad as it sounds," she said softly when she spotted Ricardo. "Honestly, it changed me." Back at company headquarters, international investors waited in the lobby. Journalists whispered, "How did a maid's daughter turn an empire into a movement?" The answer, Maya knew, wasn't in spreadsheets or slogans. It was in something more radical. She didn't build a new hierarchy. She dismantled the illusion of who deserved to lead and gave that power back to the people. Stay tuned. Maya's story isn't over. In the next episode, the transformation spreads into courts, schools, and politics, and a quiet revolution becomes a global blueprint. Subscribe if you believe power belongs to those who serve. Comment if you'd follow a leader like Maya. This is only the beginning.